Alexander was just saying that meditation is a way that you can monitor your own mind. So this is what it's all about, is that understanding and monitoring your own mind. And it's very different, isn't it, from monitoring somebody else's. So it's different from an objective view. It's looking at the mind from the inside. So the Buddha's developed a very sophisticated view of the mind from the inside that is based around meditation and the practice of meditation, the goal of meditation. So what I'll try and do is to give you a bit of a flavour for that model of the mind, for a model of the mind that includes meditation, and that is an internal model of the mind, or phenomenological model of the mind, if you know that word. You know the word phenomenological view, rather than an empirical view. It is a present moment experiential view of the mind, subjective view of the mind. So I'll be out to give you a picture of that and how that changes through the meditation process. That's the first thing I'll try and do. And then hopefully from that you'll be able to see how meditation operates. So actually there's a lot of different directions you can take in meditation from the beginning. Often the beginning is a calming process. You start by calming the mind, watching an object usually, like the breath, making the mind calm down, and then you investigate, look at what's happening in the mind. And so I'll try and give you a scheme for doing that, with which I can show you how the mind changes as you meditate, and from that you can work out there's all kinds of different kinds of meditation that act in different ways with different people. Hopefully from that you can work out how meditation can be applied in your practice. But in the second part of this seminar, after the break, then it'll be open for questions. So for about the last 12 years or so, I've been a pretty much dedicated meditation teacher, mostly in a very big monastery in England, with quite a lot of experience of people with psychiatric problems coming to the monastery looking for help. So I do have an amount of practical experience fielding people with psychiatric problems who are looking for some kind of help or relief or understanding from getting into the meditation process. So that we can go into in the second part. So if it doesn't get clear to you in the first part in a more abstract way, then hopefully in the second part you get a practical understanding of what works and what doesn't work, how you might be able to use meditation both for yourselves and for your patients in your practice. So I'm going to try and use the whiteboard and the microphone at the same time, which is going to be a bit of a dance around them. And what I'll do is I'll represent mind in front of the body. I'll explain why in a minute. So here's thought, perception. This is the key thing that we home in on in Buddhism, is this function of the mind, perception. It's the key process in Buddhist terms, and one of the most invisible processes of the mind, I would suggest to you. So we tend to see the mind as thought and feeling, and not to be able to see our own perception, not to be able to see the way that we're seeing things. We tend to see the result of how we see things, which is our thoughts and our feelings. And this is the sense world over here. And in here we have Buddhist terms we call the sense bases here. And the body here. So first of all, I'm representing here the mind of somebody who's an experienced meditator, where the mind has found a space in meditation in which all this experience is included. You think of developing an open mind, an open field of awareness, that includes all these aspects of your experience. That's what you're looking for. Mind opens up in stages gradually. And then these different phenomena can appear within this open field. You can develop a unified experience of all these aspects simultaneously within this open mind, relaxed open mind. Okay, that's what we're looking for. But often where we start off is that all these things, particularly in the modern world, are experienced in the body, or seem to be in the body. Thoughts and feelings. Thoughts are in your head, feelings are in your body. That's how we rationalise our experience, think about our experience. Whereas when you meditate, the other thing that happens, other than opening a space around your experience, to unify your experience, is that you can step back into the body. So you get an experience of stepping back out of your thoughts and feelings into the physicality of the body, and you start to experience your thoughts and feelings for what they really are, which is like a filter between you and the world. They're a part of your interaction with the world. They come out of your interaction with the world. They're not just in your head. So if the mind withdraws from the world, then it becomes empty. That's one of the main principles and experiences of discovery in Buddhist practice. You withdraw your mind from the senses completely through meditation, it goes completely empty. So the inner world, we start to see then, is not something that's inside the body, it is actually between this body experience and the world. Are people getting me so far? You're not interested. So different kinds of meditation can do one of two things. Either opening your mind into a spacious state where you can include thought and feeling together. This is a goal of something like dialectic behaviour therapy, for example. If people have heard of that. So recent developments of cognitive behaviour therapy, where they talk about developing the dialogue between head and heart is the overall principle, having those two things balanced and operating together. This is what people who develop dialectical behaviour therapy see as healthy mind, is a mind in which thoughts and feelings are continually dialoguing with each other in a very free way. And that dialogue is held within this kind of space, rather than the mind focusing in on one or other of these two experiences. So it's something that we have to experience probably to fully understand it, but I hope you can get the principle. And there's the other kind of meditation, being body-centered meditation. This is where I started out as a Buddhist. Actually, this is Tai Chi. That's this refined movement. You may have seen it in people in the parks in China. It's very slow, refined movement. So my practice at the beginning was very body-centered. So my first experience was not one of this open space, but rather one of stepping back into the body, just the physicality of the body. So any of you who are dancers or athletes or have some kind of physical skill, martial arts or this kind of thing, you may even have noticed how you can step back out of the world into your body, you know, center yourself. That's the way they talk about it in English. Becoming centered, re-centered in your experience. So the body can become a center or an anchor to the mind. So in my experience working with people who come to the monastery with psychiatric issues, then I'll tend to try and take one or other of these approaches, depending on what I see in the person who comes. So some people, they can be very spaced out, isn't it? They can't find their body, they're right out there in space, somewhere or another, isn't it? So in that case, getting somebody back into the body can be a very helpful first step. So we do things like Qi Kung or Tai Chi, these kinds of things. Just getting people aware of their body, how they're moving, particularly. The other kind of approach of opening up this space, this is actually a very common one in all the Buddhist literature now. A lot of talk of acceptance, the importance of acceptance in the therapeutic process. Again, the DBT is something that added acceptance to CBT, from what I understand. And the CBT, people know about CBT? Is that been in the course already? Yes. For some people, CBT is rather an aggressive process, trying to change the person, change their view, change everything. DBT brings in this element of acceptance to the process of CBT, and that acceptance, the accepting mind, is an open mind. I don't know if anyone noticed that. So this theory of the mind, as you see, is a lot about the movements or the dynamics of the mind, not just the content. So in Buddhism, there's a lot of insight thought to be gained to seeing the dynamics of the mind, movements of the mind in time and space, as well as the content of the mind. So there's ways that you can intervene into the mental process in terms of the movement, not just the content of the mind, but also the movement of the mind. The placing of attention in particular. Taking control of the movements of the mind, so we're not the mind being thrown around by habit. You're actually taking control and directing the mind where you want it to go. So are you all with me so far? How is that? Interesting? I don't know if it relates to your experience with patients, but it certainly does with mine on an informal level. Alexander?
I think there are parallels to the humanistic movement in psychotherapy in the 60s, and they started to incorporate the body, and beforehand they hadn't, even though Freud mentioned it, that they used this body approach more in the 60s.
Yes.
Humanistic psychotherapy.
Yes. I grew up in the 70s, so I was on the back of the 60s, and the human potential and humanistic movement, yes, that's right. Who else would be? So, Gestalt therapy, maybe some of that's ringing a few bells with people. Creating the full picture, getting the full picture, the Gestalt. Opening up the mind to the full picture. If anyone read Fixed Pearls? I don't know how mainstream it is now. There's certainly quite a lot of Gestalt therapists around. I don't know if within psychiatry or outside of it. Certainly quite a lot of Gestalt therapists involved with Buddhism. Fritz Perls, like a lot of therapists, raised up Buddhism and the Buddhist mind as being this perfect sanity. That's something to live up to, isn't it? Almost intimidating. I can't think who else. Can you think of any other names, Alexander?
What?
Can you think of any other names? Fritz Perls.
That used Buddhist
Eric Fromm, yes, another very influential writer in his time. Nina Coulthart, if you're a Freudian. Any Freudians? Well, it's Freud right out these days, that's a silly question. He smiles. So Nina Coulthart, as a Buddhist psychoanalyst in the 1970s, 80s, wrote a book called The Baby in the Bathwater. Very interesting book. I met her way back. Very interesting lady, pioneer. But there's a tremendous literature now. If you start to look up Buddhism and psychotherapy, you will find absolutely masses of material and very diverse. This is typical of Buddhism. It tends to stick to a place, time and place. So wherever it develops, it tends to develop something else. So you see all kinds of schools of Buddhist therapy. There's a school in England that offers a whole course in Buddhist psychotherapy, America, but also there's a huge variety of different approaches using these different kinds of meditation approaches, usually defined by the meditation process that it teaches principally. Either concentration or peacefulness meditation or insight vipassana. Samatha vipassana is the main division in the two schools of meditation. Either watching things, so that being aware, or making the mind very peaceful, very calm, very concentrated, very strong. Yes?
I should also mention one Norwegian psychologist, psychotherapist, who was well known some 20, 30 years ago, he must be very, very old now, and who worked with Buddhist psychotherapy and in conjunction with psychotherapy of schizophrenic conditions. It was very interesting. Gudbrandsen. I will look him up or I'll send you a link to it. He writes in Norwegian what I did for 30 years.
Yes, that's rare actually to find. That could bring me on to another point. Rare to find somebody who will work with schizophrenics or psychotics. Tend to be put outside of the scope of meditation, interestingly enough. And I've got my idea on this, and to me this is an influence of a particular school of Buddhism. There's a particular school of Buddhism that will say that when your mind is present in the present moment, that it's already pure. That's the Mahayana school of Buddhism. Most of the therapists I know from that school of Buddhism. And that doesn't, to my mind, that view doesn't fit with those two phenomena, particularly psychosis. Because the mind of a psychotic in the present moment is still psychotic. It's not that a psychotic can watch their psychosis or be aware of their psychosis. So it doesn't really fit the model. So then that means that it tends to get excluded, and these people tend to get excluded. Whereas in the Theravada tradition, my tradition, we don't think that the mind is already pure just because it's here in the present moment. We believe that the mind still has to be purified within the present moment, so that the mind in the present moment can still be deluded. So in that way, I think that our understanding of the mind can integrate the phenomena of schizophrenia or psychosis. Where you can say you meet somebody who thinks they're Napoleon, say, a psychotic who thinks they're Napoleon, then you'd say that person thinks they're Napoleon, maybe, wouldn't you? But they don't really. They're not just thinking they're Napoleon, they are Napoleon, as far as they're concerned, isn't it? They're everything about them is Napoleon. They're not just thinking Napoleon's thoughts. So they can't be aware of their own psychosis. So the same way that somebody, normal person can be aware of their thoughts and feelings with a calm mind. With a psychotic mind is sufficiently deluded not to be able to see anything clearly. They don't have what we would call mindfulness. And so bringing somebody out of psychosis, in our terms, is bringing somebody, is re-establishing that person's mindfulness from zero. people are hearing me okay? Are you following me with this? This might be a bit of a point, but we can come back to this if you like. But what this means is that you can include the psychotic or the schizophrenic within a Buddhist view of the mind, in my view. It's in Mahayana Buddhist view of the mind, I don't think you can, which is why people with psychosis and schizophrenia are boxed out of mindfulness meditation. Where should we go from here then? Mate, as far as I got is making notes for this lecture, I'm afraid, and they've already got wet. But I'll try my best. So there's in the literature, let me just put up a reference for you actually. So I found a reference which fairly well represents my take on all this. So if you can read my writing, Meditation and Psychiatry by Michael McGee. And that's in what was it called? Psychiatry. MMC. That's an American journal. So it's a little bit different from my view. It's a Zen practitioner. But if you Google meditation and psychiatry, you'll find it. Go down the list, you'll find Michael McGee. And then reading that article, it goes quite nicely into some of the reservations that psychiatrists have had about Buddhism and spirituality. Quite rightly so. I mean, there's a strain noticed within Buddhist practice of people who become obsessed with meditation, see it as the answer to everything. And that is seen as a danger within Buddhism, just the same as it's seen as a danger within psychiatry. It's not that we see meditation as an answer to everything. Meditation is part of an eightfold path in Buddhism. So in Buddhism we're looking after our thoughts and our behaviour in particular in order to calm the mind. That's the basis of the practice. So we're not just trying to sit at the end of a day, say, with your mind in chaos, having had a really bad day, and just try and get rid of all that difficulty. This is one of the big tracks of meditation. People will try and do that, and this has been seen by psychiatrists trying to apply meditation in their practice. It's also seen by Buddhist practitioners just the same. The danger of somebody becoming overly focused and trying to get rid of their problems with the meditation rather than becoming aware of their problems through the meditation, using the meditation to work with their problems. So this is seen as in a meditation retreat setting. In most of the retreat centres, say in America, they have their eye on people. They'll be insisting that people take some physical exercise of some kind in the meditation retreat, usually safety mechanisms, getting people back into their bodies. They don't allow fasting on meditation retreats in most retreat centres, so that people don't get overly focused and start to neglect the needs of their bodies, sleep or food, these kinds of things. Those are the kind of dangers that in my tradition you'll see. These are the people that always go psychotic on the meditation. It does take, as far as we see, you see that it's there, right there in the literature, the danger of psychosis in meditation. We see that as pretty much entirely confined to people who push very hard like this, very willfully, no patience or ability to open the mind or receptivity to the mind, but just trying to push everything away and stay with the object. That's the dangerous one. It can happen. Somebody latches onto meditation as being the thing. So psychiatry has been quite right to point out how in some spiritual circles that's exactly what happens. That's right. Yes, so I'm saying spiritual bypassing has become the term for this tendency. So there's a kind of health and safety code around the retreat centres in America or England, particularly the professional ones, that are aware of these kinds of dangers, and this is all well documented. But it's true that in certain spiritual circles then meditation is raised up as a kind of cure-all, and for some people will just latch onto that and will want to just keep it pushing away to try and get rid of their problems. So the first thing I always teach people in meditation is an acceptance of their issues or problems, so that they can stay with an object in meditation, but they can still be aware of what's happening in the mind. Anybody tried meditation? I've asked that bit. Any meditation? Quite a few. Oh, great. So it's actually possible to be with a meditation object and still be aware of what's going on in your mind. Interestingly enough, you find that your mind fights it, isn't it? And how you try and stay with, say, the breath at the end of your nose here, try and stay there long enough, and you see the forces of the unconscious trying to get in. They're quite fascinating. Like that, into that concentration, into that focus. These kind of automatic forces of the mind might be another way of putting it. In meditation you start to see how there are two sources of thought, or two things going on. One is your conscious thought in the present moment, and the other is this automatic flow that keeps going on and on and on. Which some people will mistakenly say that's just natural, you can't stop that. No, it's just a natural thing, this thinking. But you can, incidentally, but not through trying to stop it, but through allowing it to pass. There's a very big difference in meditation between those two things. Trying to get rid of something or stop something and allowing it to pass. Which is why this element of acceptance is so important. Patience and acceptance is so important. An element in the meditation process. There's this danger there if somebody hasn't got that. And if they're suffering so much that they just want to get rid of that suffering, then they're not really ready for meditation in my eyes. Now that's where the medication can be very helpful. But as we're going on to our second part, just concerned with basic guidelines, then I've never really seen the meditation and the medication work very well together. Haven't really seen that, unfortunately. I haven't seen meditation work well with any kind of meditation. So it tends to be one or the other. People who are in serious trouble tend to need to start off with a medication and then come off the medication and onto the meditation. Yes?
The
Why do you think that is? Why you can't combine meditation and meditation? Did you hear my question?
Yes, yeah, I heard your question. Yeah, I would have to come up with a theory, really. I mean, I can't really come up with a theory, actually, that covers all the different cases of different people with different medications, different pathology. But over the years, that's what I found. With the different conditions, I would say that there's a different dynamic going on. Some of the medications are dulling of the mind, and meditation, particularly in order to be enjoyable, meditation needs quite a high level of acuity of mind to get a good feeling from it. If your sensations are dulled through a medication, then you don't get the pleasure out of meditation. That, I would say, is the case for some of the calming medications. Why that's the case with a psychotic, I don't really know. But then we're not going so much into that realm, actually. No, not with the meditation. In terms of trying to re-establish mindfulness, yes, that's what we see as the job, is to try and get some kind of reality in there, into that system somewhere, from somewhere.
I work quite a bit with patients with meditation, and I find that patients that were on antidepressants were not acceptable at all for meditation. And I thought, antidepressants.
So did you say they're not
receptive?
Not okay, yeah, not receptive, yeah.
And quite frankly, it's because they were dulled, they were stunted. They weren't able to get a connection to whatever their thoughts or feelings were. So you couldn't work with them through. I believe it's the same thing as you said. It's a dullness of the mind.
Yeah, so she's agreeing with me on that one.
Can you summarize the question for the others?
So she was agreeing with me that the depression medication tends to dull people to a point where you can't get them into it in the first place. Yeah, that's about it.
Just maybe one question. It's pointed, I need to question. In your opinion, is mindfulness anything else than an American shortcut to meditation?
Yeah, it's certainly pointing. But we would say that mindfulness is a step towards meditation. Yes, we would say that, and that the first step people need to take often is to establish their mindfulness. In other words, become more present during the day in order to be able to really meditate. But you can also say that if you do meditate, then what you're developing is mindfulness the rest of the time. You use meditation to bring yourself into the present moment. But yes, it can be that in certain circles that mindfulness is considered enough, or mindfulness will do. So you don't need to sit there with your painful knees and watching your breath for hours. Oh no, you don't need to do that. Just be mindful. Just be mindful. Yes, I mean, actually, mindfulness is such an important component that we're always very happy to see it emphasised. It's very, very key component. And some people will actually lose their mindfulness through meditation. They'll not gain mindfulness through meditation. Mindfulness is the benchmark for your meditation. If you're a good meditator, you're a with it person. If you're not, then you'd have to question your meditation. Although you can be with it in different ways, isn't it? You're not be with it in different fields, depending what kind of meditation you're into. We very with it with people or very with it with Zen archery, you're right there with your bow, you never miss a shot. Or you're a meditating therapist and you're right there with your client. There's different applications, but whatever the application, then mindfulness is the key quality. So some of the teachers who emphasise it are correct to emphasise it. Some people are just lowering the bar of the whole thing and just trying to persuade people that you only just have to be aware, that's enough, that cuts out. There's a huge potential in meditation processes. The meditation process can go far deeper than just mindfulness, basically. Now, this is what I discovered. I mean, there I was, imagine me, there was a research rehabilitationist all these years ago. I took a year off, sabbatical, to become to live in a monastery, and I got a taste of the depth of the meditation, and I never went back. It actually does, it has an enormously more potential than the people that talk about just mindfulness and realise. If it's something that you dedicate your life to, which is what we're about, and we're designing our lives around meditation, then the potential is quite amazing. And we can talk about that as well, if you wish. We've been concentrating on maybe the other end of the scale, but there's a tremendous opportunity for self-development and self-growth through meditation, and understanding of the mind. Yes. They will overly focus internally and then lose the reality out there. If somebody has had their psychosis before, that's fairly common. Interestingly, that we're talking about an aging person practicing. But sometimes if people practicing with great faith and practicing in a bit of a different way, their focus comes out of faith rather than out of a kind of will and effort. And actually, interestingly enough, the prevalence of psychosis in Asia, in Thailand, where my tradition comes from, is very low. The psychosis and schizophrenia, at least I've never seen this written down, but a very good friend of mine who I met in Thailand, who's a dedicated meditator and psychiatrist, said that there are more psychiatrists in a block in Berkeley in America than in the whole country of Thailand. Amazingly enough. Whether that's true or not, I've never found out. And I've never met someone in our Thai community, for example, I've never met anyone who's had a psychosis I would see as a psychotic episode. I don't seem depressed very much either. But then, in our eyes, Buddhism overall is a very effective preventative medicine because of the understanding that you gain from your own body-mind process. To us, the more clearly you see reality, the more sane you are. So the more clearly you see your own body-mind, the more sane you are. So to be in a country that has a clear view of the body-mind, which I think Asian society does, compared to Western, leads to a lot more sanity. That's my personal feeling. I've never seen any evidence of that. So this process of becoming aware of your thoughts, feelings, body, has a therapeutic value just in and of itself. And you feel very sane, particularly related to awareness of the body, being very realistic about the body as a very grounding effect on the mind. Now I remember talking to Alexander, when Alexander first came to the Vulcan group, I said, I was a bit bold, and I said that to me the modern Western psychological view is a bit strange, in its language, because it was always talking about me and my mind, and me watching my mind, and me being aware of my mind. It seems to generate two people, doesn't it? Me and my mind. Doesn't it? And it's that language creates this me and my mind. Me watching my mind, me relating to my mind. Whereas in Buddhism, we would say that you're not, when you're listening, say you're meditating and all these things are coming up, what you're watching is your karma. This is your mind watching your karma, the result of all your previous thoughts and perceptions and feelings coming up. That's not your mind, that's the karma of your mind already, the result of your perception. Psychologists still seem to be looking at why mindfulness works in anxiety and depression, and to me, I would say this is fairly obvious, that if somebody's living in the present moment, then they're less anxious about the future. And if they're thinking positively, then they're less negative. So to think positively in the present, which is what mindfulness is trying to get us to do, CBT in particular, mindfulness-based cognitive behaviour therapy. Think positive in the present, this kind of thing, isn't it? Maybe I'm not doing justice to it, but if you think of a mind that's more established in the present, it's not going to be worried so much about tomorrow, less anxiety. If you think positively, you'll be happier. You see, it's kind of feedback loop, which actually some people can't see. Happy, positive thought, happy mind. And you have to have an open mind to really see that feedback, the whole loop, and not to just get stuck in your thoughts or your feelings. But to see the whole cycle and see, yes, positive thought, happy mind. And to learn that for yourself experientially, which is part of what CBT seems to me to be all about. So I had a conversation with this lady during the break. That was interesting. It gives me reference to a man called Sam Harris. This is very interesting that somebody is taking forward the boundary of what meditation can be used for, from what I understand this lady to have been saying. That's always exciting for us, of course. And like the dialectic behaviour therapy seems to be taking forward the meditation into new fields. That's the one I know a bit about. Other methods I don't know so much about. Just to touch it for a moment into dialectic behaviour therapy, then the word, as I understand this therapy, the word dialectic is used to describe the dialogue between change and acceptance. That it's not just about change, CBT, which was, this lady agreed with me, so what she's encouraged me now, you see, this lady agreed with me that CBT is a little bit aggressive in a sense, and it's more change from the outside than change from the inside. And then DBT, with its emphasis on acceptance, is something that has this softer quality to it and seems to be able to embrace more serious conditions. Again, that seems a little bit obvious intuitively, and if you can't cure it, accept it, isn't it? If you can't find a way forward, then to be able to accept where you are is a very important element. But I just thought I'd mention how I see these two qualities coming together, this quality of change and the quality of acceptance. I see those two coming together in the quality of patience. So in Buddhism, patience is raised up as the most useful spiritual quality. That's the most useful, because it brings together the ability to look for change or look for progress and this accepting quality. with patience, you can be striving for a change and still accepting the condition the way it is. And so in our terms, this is not so much a dialogue or a shift in the therapist from one kind of approach to another. You know, that one moment you're trying to get somebody to change in some way or another, suggest something to somebody. Why don't you do this? Why don't you see it like, is this really the case? Challenging somebody's view. And then shifting into an accepting mode and being there for the person and empathetic. These two, in our eyes, don't have to be two different modes in a therapist or in therapy. They can come together in the quality of patience, where you're patiently engaging with somebody. Then you're able to accept the way they are, and you're still going somewhere. So certainly I find in all the encounters that I've had in my life, I'm an abbot of a monastery, so I'm the person that people come to when they come to the monastery. Then patience to me is the key quality that seems to make things work. So I suggest to you that as therapists, then maybe you think that this doesn't fit with the time constraints of being a busy psychiatrist. I don't know. It's not about patience. Isn't really about time in my mind. It's the quality of mind and the quality that you can develop through the meditation process. Part of the calm mind, isn't it? Your patience, not trying to push something along. So this seems to me to be a crucial aspect in the development of an alliance with the patient, which is what Alexander was pointing out to me at the end of the last session, that how important this sense of an alliance with the patient and an emotional bond with the patient is in the therapeutic relationship. Then to be patient with the person, to me, is catching a hold of that person and running along with them at their pace, if you like. So that's what I keep trying to remind myself to be as I'm engaging with people, whoever they are, but in particular people who have problems and are way off, seeing things way off from the way I do. Is it fading already then?
Yeah, but that got any better.
And then Alexander was encouraging me to give you a few examples of clinical cases, and maybe I'll start off with just some very simple examples. Perhaps one related to the discussion that this lady got involved with in terms of depression and meditation. That the lady at the monastery who was been suffering with depression for about 2 years and started coming to the monastery on medication. And being from Thailand, she had a lot of faith in meditation as a way forward, and she really wanted to meditate. So this also relates to this lady's question. And yet, it's very clear that while she was still on the medication, she just couldn't get it going. So even though she had the motivation to faith to meditate, then something wasn't happening. She just couldn't really get anything going. Her thinking mind just kept coming back, interrupting. She couldn't keep any kind of continuity of attention on a meditation object. In discussion with her, then she talked to her doctor, and her doctor, over a time, through counselling and other methods, CBT basically, then she managed to get off her medication. And as soon as she got off her medication, then her meditation started to take off, in the sense that she could just simply enjoy the process. So that stuck in my mind as something that could be the block created by medication in the meditation process. That people they seem to lack the sensitivity in order to really enjoy something as subtle as the breath. So if you imagine that anyone has to really concentrate and sensitize themselves to that process in order to really get involved with that process and to get an enjoyment out of the meditation. And that's very important, to get some element of enjoyment through all the means of the whole process. So that case is a classic pattern, I would say, in terms of depression. Yeah. No, she wasn't bipolar. She was on I think it was a Prozac or Prozac-related antidepressant, from what I remember. Yeah. Perhaps another interesting, quite an interesting one actually, is another case was brought to mind by talking to this lady about OCD. There's a woman, a 17-year-old woman, who came to one of our monasteries with quite serious OCD, and she met a monk friend of mine who said, "Oh, well, religion's a bit like OCD. All these rituals that you go through is a bit like OCD," which found a good joke, found a meeting point with this young lady. But there's a kind of truth to that, that within, if you think of the religious side of Buddhism or meditation, this kind of ritual side, chanting or other rituals, there is a calming element to these kind of rituals, and these rituals would have a valid meaning rather than some kind of strange meaning. So it's also the case that within our setting is not just the application of a particular therapy, but just encountering somebody with a different view of life that is interesting, has an interesting effect. So I was saying to someone the other day who seemed to be very much stuck in their view of life, but to meet somebody of a completely different culture with a completely different value system would be a very valuable experience for them. And so that I see around an international monastery like ours, or a group of people with tremendous diversity in terms of their perceptions of the world, that also seems to me to have a kind of therapeutic quality to it. That kind of broad, cosmopolitan environment.
Does one have to have a religious understanding of this way of working? Or will this way of working have an effect if you do not have that belief?
So that's an excellent question. That's a crucial question, really, isn't it? So certainly, like I said just now, if somebody has faith, then they can apply themselves to meditation in a way that somebody who doesn't have faith can't. But in Buddhism, then the whole principle of Buddhism really is that the truths of life are things that we are discovering out of the meditation process. So certainly somebody with faith can be applying themselves to meditation objects in a way that somebody else doesn't. But Buddhism is essentially what you would call a Gnostic religion, in the sense that the truths of the religion are such that they are to be discovered for each individual for themselves. And meditation is the vehicle for that. So that you form a basis, so in good behaviour, a good life, and then meditation is your primary investigator of life. So you're learning about yourself and about the world through developing your mindfulness. So essentially there is no dogma in Buddhism. And that means that, I could have come here, I need to have talked to anything, I need to have said anything about Buddhism, actually. And I'm glad that you could accept me as a teacher dressed like this. That's very nice. You're open-minded, the culture's open-minded enough to accept a religious person as a teacher of meditation, but I've taught meditation in all over, never mentioning Buddhism. The reason I can do that is because of this, because we're out as Buddhists to find out the truths of life through meditation. Buddhism is not a dogmatic religion in the same way as others. You're not asked to believe in something. You're asked to find out for yourself. You're not pushing anything on anyone. We're asking you to use the tool called meditation to find out for yourself. That's a very important principle, which means that we've been let in. Is one of the reasons I think we've been let into institutional settings in England over the years, various kinds, because we're seen not to be teaching in a religious way, or the mindfulness in schools movement in England, which is massive now. So within about 2 years' time, they think that every single child in school will be taught mindfulness, have a mindfulness lesson about once a week. This was all started by Buddhists, but there is absolutely no Buddhism within the Mindfulness in Schools project. Some of the people who run the sessions are Buddhists, and then cleverly enough, they'll set up a Buddhist or meditation group within the school. So if the kids make the connection, then they can follow up their interest in meditation with an interest in Buddhism. But I would say that in England, at least 90% of the people who come to monasteries have no interest in Buddhism. They're purely interested in meditation. And that fits. And we have doctors sending people to us post-mindfulness courses in England to learn how to apply mindfulness in daily life. So as I said, when I entered the monastery, I had no idea how deep the meditation went. So it's as a monk that is dedicating my life to it that I found out how deep it goes. So going back into that setting, I would have a completely different view of the potential. That's for sure. I mean, you're very right to say that progress in meditation requires this kind of broader environment in order to really succeed. But I can't see many elements of that would be excluded from an environment like this. Myself.
What I actually wonder is that, do you think it could possibly be harmful for someone without doing what?
Well, certainly. I mean, let's turn this around, just discuss this in a different way and say, could visiting a monastery possibly be harmful for somebody who's psychotic? Would that be a different angle on it? And we would say yes, actually. Too quiet. So, in an active monastery would feel more confident. I'll just a second. I mean, an active monastery would feel more confident, I think, to take somebody who is really having those kinds of problems than a very quiet one. Because it's so much time to yourself. What we try to provide in a meditation monastery is a lot of time for yourself, and structure and predictability of life. So there's not very much happening, and then you can turn inwards. But for somebody who's psychotic, then they'll often need to be pulled out of their psychosis into the world, rather than being in a situation where there's nothing happening, and their minds will tend to be going inwards more and more, and then they will lose the world. So in that case, yes, there's a danger there. So in that case, I wouldn't be thinking that you would be taking psychotic patients and, at the moment in the monastery, building huts, cabins for monks to live in solitude through the forest. I can't imagine doing that.
I kind of wonder whether you had any specific thoughts about how, it's similar to the previous question, I guess, but what can we as therapists kind of take away from the Buddhist approach in terms of the way that we meet the people that we're working with?
So just the same as, I'm talking here about how the meditation process takes you in two directions, where you find a certain space, a spaciousness of mind. This is one. And certainly if you find that kind of spaciousness, as this lady was saying, then the patient, you'll tend to encourage the patient to do the same. So there is a degree to which you can be doing the work for the patients, like you're doing their meditation for them just to a degree. Where if you're patient with them, they can be more patient with themselves. If you're more accepting of them, they can be more accepting of themselves. That's how you're creating this kind of space. And then the other way, a more subtle way in a way, is the second way in which meditation can take you, which is right into the body, where you meet somebody. We've got a few monks who are really great examples as elderly monks. If one of them were to walk in here, you would know about it. It's like big presence. They used to say of our teacher in Thailand, small person, big presence. And he sits there and it's like a mountain sitting in front of you. You get this tremendous sense of solidity from that person. So to me, some people need a sense of space and acceptance. Some people need looking for an anchor, like somebody who's very solid and is not just moving around or thrown around by what's happening. That's another way of creating a refuge for somebody. The sense of solidity, not reacting. And that comes around, in my experience, that comes around through a centering on the body, this kind of sense of being very solidly present. Your body is something that the mind can't move around. When you're meditating, sitting still, then your mind is not moving you around. It gives you a sense of stillness and solidity, which can then also be apparent to somebody else you know how much communication is non-verbal, isn't it? They can pick up a quality like that and feel safe with somebody who's that solid. That's another way in which you can, through the way you are, be a refuge to your patients, calm your patient down. It's a very interesting, I often tell a story from people who've heard about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who worked in the hospice movement, one of the founders of the hospice movement in America. She was doing research in an oncology ward, and she found that on certain shifts on this oncology ward, the patients were much calmer than in other times. She couldn't work out why. And the only member of staff who was consistently present on the shifts where the patients were calmer was a cleaner. Nobody else was consistent. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross ended up interviewing the cleaner, thinking, what's she doing? And she first of all started actually observing the cleaner. What's she doing? She must be just saying something to the patients or doing something with the patients in order to make them calmer. Observing her, she found that she wasn't talking to the patients. She was just doing her job. How could she be making the patients calmer? Thought Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So she interviewed this lady, black lady, and this lady had had the most terrible life. She'd grown up in some terrible ghetto in a city in America. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's understanding of why it was that she made the patient so calm was that she was so calm and accepting of a very difficult situation because of what she'd been through herself. And just her presence was calming the patients down. Not anything she said or anything she did. She was just the cleaner. And so that fascinated Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She made this cleaner who actually thought, being called into the psychiatrist's office, she thought she was in for a telling off. That she got promoted to be part of the team running the program. Which just shows you how you can influence a patient without doing anything, just by who you are, how you present. If you're willing to go through your own mental difficulties, sit through your own mental difficulties without distraction, you are much, much more likely to be able to sit and listen to other people's difficulties without trying to get away from them, or without aversion or feeling distracted. It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to listen to something, difficult to listen to other people's problems, unpleasant experiences. In the same way, but it's exactly the same as being open to and able to listen to our own difficulties. And that's one thing that a meditator can develop is this de-linking is the word. One of the new buzzwords, where you're able to listen to your own difficulties without reacting in a negative way or a self-destructive way. That mechanism is just the same as with a patient. Can they be aware of their problem without reacting in a negative way and entering into a vicious circle with the whole thing? So we can meditate maybe for the last 10 minutes, that would be suitable, and then I'm not in any rush to go. We're going to eat here, I think. So if anyone wants to join the picnic afterwards, then I'm very happy to meet you. So if you'd like to take up a meditation posture, which would mean sitting unsupported, so if you're in a chair, you just sit off the back of the chair. Now this is a great aid in meditation, incidentally. You're getting aware of your body. It's not slumping into a chair. You become part of the chair. And if you close your eyes, then that's the first step, obviously, in an inner focus rather than an external one, is to close your eyes, which may be a bit of an act of trust in a strange situation like this, out in the middle of the field. And then I would suggest to you, if you take up meditation, then it's always good to start the same with a kind of checklist. So posture, first of all, an upright posture is good. So it also keeps the mind alert. So the biggest dangers as a beginner meditator is you're just going to fall asleep. You get calm, you just over you go. So you need an alert posture. And then you're concentrating on the object in order to bring yourself into the present moment and to remain aware. And the commonest meditation used is meditation on the breath. That's the very calming meditation. So you become aware of the breath that's passing in and out of the body and not controlling it in any way, not trying to change it, just aware of what's happening. It can be a very soothing sensation, the breath passing in and out of the body. And the art of it is just to stay with that concentration object no matter what happens in your mind. You're not using that concentration object to try to get rid of your thoughts and feelings. You're just staying with it no matter what happens. If you're a beginner, this will just be a small area of concentration there at the nose tip, so just staying at that place, calming the mind. I'll just leave you just to try that for a few minutes. Stay with the object and then let whatever arise and pass. Stay with this long enough, then you get a feeling like you're sitting on the bus. Imagine you're sitting on a bus and your mental world is passing you by. Just like sitting on a bus, you're looking out the window, going along, the world passes you by, arises, ceases, comes and goes. And you can sit there and hold the object, then you get this same sense of a mental world, arising and ceasing just like the world around you. Same. Exactly the same. We're out to develop a mind that is both calm and alert together, not one or the other, both together, both calm and alert. That brings us to the end of our session. Very pleased to have been invited here, and it's a very noble thing you're out to do, isn't it? Helping other people in the way that you are. Very much acknowledge that, and I'm very happy to come and offer what I can offer.